Good afternoon, everybody. 大家好. My name is Heng. Welcome to our lecture today. It is Saturday, the 4th of January, 2025. How about that? Did you notice? Have you all learned to write 2025 at the end of your dates instead of 2024? Still working on that myself. Glad you're with us today for our lecture on the picture biography of Master Empty Cloud. If that is what you've come for, you are in the right place. As they say, don't you move a dad-burned inch. You're right where you belong. All right, I'm going to ring my bell and encourage us to bow 3 times right from where you're sitting, and we'll get started. Today's Dharma request is going to be from Haining, from Zhejiang. It is Gong Jingchao. Jishi is going to make the Dharma request. 如果各位愿意听中文，请你们看到那个右下角那个软体的右下角一个控制板，就说 interpretation， 那里有一种流利的普通话，欢迎你们参听。If you'd like to listen to Vietnamese, there's a link in the chat box. Click on that. It will take you to a fluent, kind-hearted Vietnamese translation. And if you would like to take a turn to request Dharma, there's an email there. You can send an email to our tireless coordinator, and she will help you get set up to request Dharma. All right. 那我现在敲引擎上下，如果各位呢愿意在自己的座位上，就行3闻讯礼。Here we go. 一闻讯 ，second bow. 3闻讯。好的 ，OK， 好。Gong Jingchao, if you'd like to request Dharma, please go ahead.
恭敬大德僧体，为此法会及一切众生，请转妙法轮，教导我们如何了生脱死，离苦得乐，殊证无生。Where the Sangha with great virtue, out of compassion, for the sake of this assembly and all living beings, please turn the wonderful Dharma wheel to teach us how to listen free, and attain breath and amber and then, and quickly realize noble.
Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa.
Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa.
Homage to the blessed, noble, and perfectly enlightened one.
Homage to the present noble and the perfect enlightened one.
Namo saranto suchedoye olahuri sammyao samputtoshe.
Namo sadanto suchedoye alahadi samyao sambuddhoshe.
无上甚深微妙法，百千万劫难遭遇。我今见闻得受持，愿切如来真实义。Supreme and wondrous Dharma, subtle and profound, rarely is encountered even in billions of eons. But now we see and hear it and accept it reverently. May we truly understand the Buddha's actual meaning. 好的，那么恭居士感恩 ，Thank you for the Dharma request. 师父上人，各位师兄，大家阿弥陀佛。We are here in the Gold Coast of Australia, the Gold Coast Dharma realm. It's 2025, and we're going to continue our investigation of the life of our grand teacher, Master Empty Cloud. We will respectfully acknowledge the Kombu-Meri people of the Ugambi language region as traditional storytellers and custodians of the land where our monastery is located, here in southeast Queensland. We pay our respects to their elders, past, present, and emerging, ones to come, and all First Nations people whose sovereignty was never ceded. So, 我们就说，我们恭敬地承认冈贝语族的空布玛丽人，他们是我们寺院所在地的传统叙事者和守护人。我们向过去、现在和未来的长者们致敬，并且向所有从来没有放弃主权的第一民族的原住民也致敬。Alrighty, here we go. Bells sound wide, resound throughout 100 million worlds. The Buddha's law is heard and spread all throughout the triple world. The wondrous sounds that everywhere fill the Dharma realm with peace. May those who hear it gain the strength to follow in faith the Buddha's path. 众生传3000劫内，佛法扬万亿国中，共训其法界和平，利益报他能厚德。Okay, that is all of our preliminaries for today. Glad you're here, everyone. Let's see here. Okay. Last time we had this picture on the screen, I said 5 extra points to anybody who could identify where it is. And someone says, I know where it is. It's Yuan Tong Bao Dian. Oh, that's good. That's correct. You're not wrong. But the monastery itself is in Jiangxi province. It's high up in the mountains. On Yunjushan Cloud-Dwelling Mountain, it's Zhenru Monastery. The new Guoji Chanxiu Zhongxin, that is it's not complete yet, but soon it will be. And the monk in the yellow robe in the center is Master Xuyun, who is the chief abbot there. When he became the abbot of Zhenru Monastery, he was the youngest abbot in all of China in charge of a major monastery. And you can see that he's attracted a large number of monks, nuns, and lay people there supporting his work to keep the tradition of Master Empty Cloud going. The Zhenru Monastery, True Suchness Monastery, is kind of like where the Marines would live if they were into Chan meditation, because life there is bitter cultivation that turns sweet, if you know what I mean. Life is hard there. The hours are long. The food is delicious, but just enough. There's no Starbucks. There's no ice cream shop. You can eat your fill of delicious, nutritious food, but very quickly you realize that food is just like gas for the car. You fill your tank and you go. You don't sit around and discuss the octane count or the smell or the color or the price of the gas. You just eat to stay alive so that you can cultivate. So, wonderful place. If you're serious about your cultivation, definitely consider. Now, the news hasn't gone around yet about the opening, the grand opening of the International Chan Study Center, because it hasn't been announced yet. But in the next couple of years, it will be. And you too, if you plan now, can be one of the 1,000 people who meditate together in the Chan Hall. Master Xuyun has designed a Chan Hall that will sit 1,000 people at once. Can you imagine the size of the bell to notify the sit has begun? And the rules of the Chan Hall are held just the way they were when the Chan school came into its heyday in the Tang Dynasty. So this is a place where the traditional rules are observed and where they flourish. Alrighty, here is today's episode. Last week, Master Empty Cloud, remember the picture here? Master Empty Cloud was carrying bricks, mixing mortar, moving stones, reading feng shui, and you can see he's got his work robe on. He's carrying a heavy bundle. Master Empty Cloud was one of the accomplishments of his life whenever people gather to tell his story is how many monasteries he rebuilt. And he was an expert in looking at the old records of monasteries that flourished 3, 4, 5, 6, 7,000 years ago that had been ruined over time with weather, changing personalities, warfare, floods, fires, droughts, etc. Takes their toll on monasteries that have been around for thousands of years. So Master Empty Cloud would go and rebuild them. And this is the last episode last week was he was rebuilding a monastery in, let's see here, where was he? Let's see, Yixing, where the famous teapots are made. And he was working with famous monks of the time, Ren Zhi, Fa Shi, and Fa Ren, Fa Shi. I looked for more information about the lives of these monks, and they were famous at the time, but they were famous for their cultivation. They were not political monks, they weren't wealthy monks, they weren't powerful in terms of the size of their monastery. They were known for their cultivation. Plus, Master Empty Cloud is out in Anhui province at Jiuhuashan, and these are, at the time, these places, this is back, mind you, this is the 19th century. This is not the 20th century. This is not the 21st century. This is 1890. And Master Empty Cloud was, he was out on one of the four famous mountains, Sidaminngshan, they're called in China. And these monasteries were remote. Now, of course, if you want to go to Jiuhuashan, there are tour packages that will take you there because the average citizen of China has discovered how fascinating, how beautiful is the scenery, how rich is the history. So these four mountains have become tourist sites. But in my experience, the Chinese government has done a really good job of protecting, and certainly they want lots of folks to come, but they've done it in a way that can hold all of these tourist feet and can feed all of these tourist bellies that come and can fill their minds and hearts with accurate stories about the history. We've, having traveled the Buddhist world, you can tell when money is well spent to protect and to propagate Dharma sites, Dharma locations. My first visit to the famous sites in India in 1983, my first trip to the four sites of the Buddha's history was not that way. It's a different story in India. For example, up in Bihar was Nalanda University there, and this is Bodh Gaya is up there, and the government tended to put the money in their pockets instead of into the sites. But China didn't do that for the four holy mountains. And there are four Taoist mountains too, which are also well preserved, The roads are wide and clean. The lodgings are adequate, and you have a choice, and ordinary folks can go there and have a wonderful experience, right? So Jiuhuashan is that way right now. Now, when Master Empty Cloud was there, oh my goodness, it's understandable that you wouldn't know about these monks. Now, we talked about the Patriarch Mi Yun, Yuan Wu Changshi. He is well known. So last week I told his stories because from him came a revitalization of Buddhism in the Ming Dynasty. So everybody thinks of the Tang, the 7th to the 10th century, as the golden era of Buddhism in China. And then after the Song, which followed the Tang, there was the Yuan dynasty. And Buddhism went to sleep. The Mongols came and they brought their version of Lamaism and all. So things changed, and the monasteries kind of fell out of repair, and there weren't any famous monks. But when the Ming came around, there was this renaissance, and the Patriarch Mi Yun and others, Yuan Wu Changshi, really brought new attention to the ancient monasteries. They brought the Dharma forward. They reprinted the sutras. They ordained new monks. And so when there are people like these kind of luminaries in the Buddhist world, we can find their stories. So let's move on now to Jiuhuashan. Everybody ready? We can read this together. You can see it on the screen. Here we go. Let's read it together. Here we go. 辛卯52岁，在南京办松岩上人，住修净城寺。时与洋人山居士往来，研究因明论、般若灯论。住净城寺过冬，供一生，到处助人行建道场，创修寺院，但有利益众生及社会，竭力行之。Okay, 1891, the master was 52 years old. When he was in Nanjing, he assisted his friend, the Venerable Master Songyan, to repair Jingcheng Monastery. During this time, Upasika Yang Renshan, often called Master Yun, and together they studied Yinming and Boro-Deng Shastras. The master passed the winter there. Throughout his long life, wherever he went, the master freely lent his aid in the creation of Bodhimandas and the repair of monasteries and temples. His motive was to benefit living beings and society in general. He exhausted his efforts to that end. Okay, it's the Guangxu, it's the Qing dynasty. The end of the dynasties of China is not far. 1911 is when the last dynasty fell. So we're just 21 years before, the Qing dynasty has 21 years of life before that's it. And the emperors from 5,000 years to the present are about to come to an end. He is 52 years old. He is in China's central east, Nanjing. What I discovered in reading up about this time was that Nanjing was held by the rebellions that led to China's civil war in the 19th century focused on Nanjing. The Taiping rebels Nanjing was one of the places that they held militarily. And that was only 50 years before. So China's heartland has been, for the 19th and 20th centuries, were very hard. In another few years, the Japanese wars are going to begin, and the Japanese invade. So we're looking at the life of a Buddhist monk who is not a combatant, and yet the monasteries were in the way of the warfare and got bombed all the same. So what do we find? We find that he is going around helping his monk friends to repair old monasteries again. Further, we get for the first time a layman, a famous layman, mentioned in the story. And the reason why is this layman was a remarkable man. He, the story goes that he was, see here, I want this please, there we go. He was an official. Mr. Yang he was born into an official family, and his father was a successful candidate in the imperial exams, the same as Zheng Guofan. And Zheng Guofan was one of the generals who successfully fought back the Taiping rebels. The reason I bring this up is in pretty much, we don't know, very few people who have not personally studied China at the end of the Qing dynasty, like who were the boxers? I heard of the Boxer Rebellion. Were they like, float like a butterfly, sting like a bee kind of boxer? No, they're not boxers like Cassius Clay. They're this phenomenon. When you have a country and a culture that knows its history for 5,000 years, you take a long look, and the thing that the emperors feared the most was the arising of rebellious groups, rebellion. And the Taiping rebels were one of these rebellions. And the reason I mention it, because it's not directly mentioned here, is because they think there aren't accurate records, but they think that 100 million people may have died as a result of the Taiping rebellion. And you think, wait a minute, how is that possible? Yeah, that's what I was reading up on it. And it was a 15-year period where this gentleman who was a Kejia Hakka person decided that Confucius was holding the country down, and you had to get rid of Confucianism, that Buddhism was Indian and corrupt, so you have to get rid of Buddhism. And he was a Christian, but he was not a Christian that any Christian acknowledged. He was a do-it-yourself kind of guy. And he found just the way the timing and the poverty and such, he found a lot of receptive ears to his talk of creating a new kingdom of heaven for Chinese people. That's what he called it. He called himself the brother of Jesus Christ. And so this is the founder of the Taiping Rebellion. 15 years later, hundreds of millions of people, at least certainly, if not 100 million, there are various estimates, but in the millions of people died as a result. And so Mr. Yang, who is mentioned here in our story, was born the same time as one of the generals loyal to the Manchus, the Qings, who overcame the Taiping rebels, someone named Zheng Guofan. Now, Yang Renshan, the story goes, this fascinating story of his life, was that his father wanted him to be a scholar. He didn't want to be a scholar. He wanted to be a martial artist. He wanted to be a knight errant. So he went off to fight the Taiping rebels and helping Zheng Guofan, the general, who overthrew them successfully. he was an engineer and was a patriot. And so this was how he came into prominence. But they moved to Hangzhou. His family moved to Hangzhou to follow his father's official livelihood. And he wanted to marry a local woman, but his mother said, no, don't marry her. She's not suitable. The mother stepped in, and he took it badly, Mr. Yang. He says, left him in low spirits. So what did he do? In Hangzhou, he walked around Shihu, kind of sucking his knuckles, meaning of course, he's not going to fight his mom, but she interfered with his love life, and he got depressed. But one day, in a local bookstore, what did he find? Da Cheng Qi Xin Lun. He found a book called The Awakening of Faith in the Mahayana, and the Bodhisattva spirit touched his heart, and Buddhism just lit up the darkness of his his heartbreak. And so he began a lifelong commitment to Buddhism, and this led him to Master Empty Cloud. Mr. Yang, created the Jinling Sutra publishing house, and our library at Gold Mountain Monastery had many traditional Chinese sutras, butterfly printed with the paper that spreads out like an accordion, printed at the Jinling Sutra publishing house. So that's why we remember the name of Mr. Yang. He started a Buddhist educational institution, the Zhihuan Si Academy, he ran into Master Empty Cloud. They studied Yin, Ming, and Boro, Prajna. So, how interesting. I will say, this is when you touch, here we go, here's Mr. Yang, a picture of him discussing the situation with some monks. The idea that this guy who turned his back on scholarship in order to protect China from the rebels, and yet was still softy enough that failure in romance could break his heart, and yet Buddhism could light it up, right? That's very relatable, that you know, that we have this, you see the human behind the legends. And he was able, through deep affinities, to find his way to Master Empty Cloud, and to talk and to study the Dharma together over the winter of 1891. Likewise, when I visited Bailin Si some years back, we traveled with the monks to a town called Zhengbing, to a monastery called Linji Si, which in Japanese is Rinzai, right? One of the famous Chan schools. And the abbot there said, oh, he said, you know who studied here? He said, this is where our General Secretary Xi Jinping used to come and sit with the abbot of Linji Si and talk about the Dharma. They were best friends, and they investigated the principles of Buddhism here. So it's like this pattern continues, where monks and leaders of society find their way together to study the Dharma. So, okay, so that's a story here. Now, it says that the last part of Master Hua's citing of this episode says, wherever Master Empty Cloud went, he was a builder of and a repairer of monasteries and temples. We're going to hear an episode later on. This is worth talking about. There was one monastery that was famous for burning. It was burned to the ground multiple times, but it was still a famous monastery because monks, influential monks, found the energy there very special, probably because of the fire element being out of balance. So a local governor said, Master Empty Cloud, would you please come and take a look? Why does this monastery keep burning? So Empty Cloud, Master Xuyun, took a look at the front and he said, you see that rock? He said, that rock is what's causing the imbalance so that the fire element can't find its own natural place here. You got to move that rock and that'll change things. And so you go, okay, that's feng shui, huh? He says, no, it's called di li. This is an understanding of how the four elements, earth, air, fire, and water, need to be in balance before you can have a healthy monastery. Monastery that keeps catching on fire indicates it's unhealthy, too much fire, just like people with bad tempers. So he says we got to adjust it. And so the governor said, well, I've actually heard that theory before, but we can't move the rock, it's too heavy. We tried at one point with horses and we couldn't move it. So Master Empty Cloud said, oh, well, here, let me take a look, he said. And he said, I need 2 guys, and we need a couple pry bars. So everyone laughed. They said, yeah, you're the skinny monk, right? He probably weighs 130 pounds. You're going to move the rock with 2 guys and pry bars? He said, you just need to know how, he said. So he said, apply it here. Click here. So they dug, they put the pry bar, the iron bar here, and iron bar here. He says, okay, you guys, now, ready? E-R, san. And they pressed, and the rock moved, rolled down the mountain. And that was the last time the monastery burned. So everyone's going, I guess you just have to know how, right? So yeah, that's right, know how. It's not a trick, it's a technique. Ready? Here we go. 谷地大顺有修风，与人为善我相空。今生云公无他意，福斯社会力推行。The ancient Emperor Shun had an upstanding reputation. Joining others in doing good deeds, all trace of self was gone. Master Yun, a sage of the present, was that way as well. He exhausted every effort to benefit society. So here, this is when you want to know about Chinese civilization. Shun, Da Shun, is one of the legendary emperors of the past. His story is 3,000 years old, and people still remember it. Now, is it accurate? Yeah, Chinese histories. Chinese are famous historians, libraries full of histories. They can still go back and say, we had a founder, along with Yu, famous Emperor Yu, who regulated the water, and all of the famous emperors of China, including the Duke of Zhou that Confucius talked about all the time. We still remember their standard of behavior. Now, a culture that has a historic memory that goes back that far is a culture that has deep roots. They also respond to the Yushu Jujin, they say, that you have to accord with the times. However, when you got times to accord with, for example, America, 1776 was when we trace our history back. Australia, now the Aboriginal people go back tens of thousands of years. They don't have a written culture, they have a oral culture. And so that's they say the oldest civilization on the planet. But the Chinese have been writing down, and they can point to these individuals and say, we can behave like them to be unselfish. Doing good deeds, all trace of self is gone. famous Emperor Shun, he's considered one of the Shaozi. There's 24 Xiao, the 24 filial paragons. So Shifu, Master Xuyun Hua, cites him in the poem, and he says, Master Empty Cloud is the same way now. Although he's a Buddhist monk, he's still a citizen of the country, and the way he did things, his standard of behavior is our model for the present. So, benefiting society. Can you be both a patriot and a religious person? Yes, indeed. There's no contradiction. So, that's one reason why we want to keep these stories going. All right, moving on here. We're back to Jiuhua Shan, Nine Flowers Mountain. It's Jiuhua Cui Feng Mao Peng, living in a hut on Jiuhua Mountain's Cui Feng summit. Cui is azure. It's a kingfisher color, the way that incredible blue of a kingfisher's wing. Okay, here we go. Ready, everybody? 人臣53岁，约普照，月霞，印连诸法师，结为同参，同上九华山，修翠峰茅棚同住，有普照师主讲，大方广佛华严经，弘无照仪，贤守一宗。皆睡已久，各处温讲多附会，江夏显教复振. Okay. During the Master's 53rd year, he joined in cultivation together with Venerable Masters Pu Zhao, Yue Xia, and Yin Lian. They climbed Jiuhua, Nine Flowers Mountain, and repaired the huts on Cuifeng Summit, where Dharma Master Pu Zhao expounded the Mahavaipulya Buddha Avatamsaka Sutra, the Flower Garland Sutra. He explained the 5 teaching modes according to the Shensho Avatamsaka school, which had been neglected for centuries. People came from all over and showed great interest in his lectures. Thus, the Shensho teaching was revived in the area south of the river Jiangnan. Okay. So this episode is not so much about remarkable feats of strength, bowing across the country, surviving a snowstorm, or being turned away from an inn, or none of those things. This is about coming together of the Sangha, Dharma friends who are monks. So after all, Master Empty Cloud is a Buddhist monk, and we're getting to hear the details of the life of a Buddhist monk. And sometimes there's movement, sometimes there's stillness. In this case, he's settling in to listen to the Dharma. Once again, we hear the names of monks, 3 monks. Pu Zhao, Yue Xia. Pu Zhao is shining everywhere. It's a really nice name. Universal illumination, shining everywhere. Yue Xia, moon aura, the orb, the light around the moon. And Yin Lian, sealing with a lotus. So the yin is like a chop where you put the seal on wax, that sort of thing. So sealed with a lotus, or sealed like a lotus, lotus seal. Who are these 3 monks? They're hermits. They are monks who find company with Master Empty Cloud. They are Tong Can, fellow, friends in the Dharma, friends on the path. For example, Master Xuyun Hua said that he and, I'm going to find it, see if I can find it. Okay. Hold on, see if I can find this picture. I should have found this beforehand. Shifu and Sumedo. Okay. Photos, there it is. That's not it. I'll show it next time. Master Xuyun Lecture said that he and Ajahn Sumedho, an American monk who went to Thailand to study the Dharma and then got sent to England where he started teaching on his own. Shifu said that he and Sumedho are fellow cultivators from the past. And when you see the two of them standing side by side, you can believe it. There's just something that there's like they're two halves of one thing. That is Tongcan, fellow cultivators. Together, these three monks with Empty Cloud went up Nine Flowers Mountain. And they got to the top, and they found a maopeng. A maopeng is a cultivation hut. It's not a house, it's not a monastery, it's a place to keep the weather off your head so that you can cultivate. It's the most basic. We have shown Ted Berger's film, The Mountain Path, recently, and that's where you see cultivators in maopengs. They are really basic. There's just one of the great episodes in Ted Berger's film shows a bhikshuni, a Buddhist nun, who just prefers to keep the company of the birds and the small furry animals that live up above, almost above the tree line, not quite, right at where the trees change, where the vegetation changes. She's up so high in the mountains that she has to bring dirt in to grow any vegetables whatsoever. You can grow potatoes or what else? Sweet potatoes, right? Digua, that's pretty much the only thing that will grow there. To get water, she has to take a long, coiled up rubber hose and walk way up high, walk for half an hour, because half an hour's walk from her cabin is a spring, a water spring where the water comes out of the rock. She fastens the rubber hose into the source of the spring and then walks back, unrolling it. And then she has to get the suction right, and then the water starts to flow. She fills up her water containers, fills up her cistern and her plastic tubs and bottles, and then climbs all the way back up, disconnects the rubber hose, winds it back up, and brings it back down. And that's the only way she gets water. That is priceless. That rubber hose allows her to live there. Otherwise, no water. This is a mountainside. So that's a maopeng. And these monks live there together. And what do they do when they live there together? Here's the picture. They're listening to a sutra lecture. And they have one of the monks, here it is, Cui Feng Maopeng, here's the name on it. They happen to be with a monk who can jiang jing, explain sutras. And this monk is famous for explaining the Avatamsaka Sutra, Huayan Jing. What's fascinating is our teacher was the same. Master Xuyun Lecture took 9 years out of his life to explain the Avatamsaka Sutra every single night, twice on Saturday, twice on Sunday. He said, this is important, not in so many words, but by his actions. The fact that 90 minutes of every night was devoted to this sutra until it was done. That's a long text. And Master Hua was making a regular speed. I mean, he didn't leave any word out. And sometimes he would lecture a little slower than others, but he kept a steady pace. And he did it in 2 languages, so that the audience sitting in Gold Mountain Monastery, or City of 10,000 Buddhas could hear in English, but what that meant was we translators would we would tape 10 minutes of Shifu's words, run the tape back, play them a second time, and translate line by line like that. That was part of the progress, part of the reason it took 9 years. But that way, people who understood Chinese could hear Zhongwen. We who needed English could hear English. So, and then now we're still in the business of translating translating Shifu's lectures and publishing them as we go. So notice here, this episode emphasizes the fact that Pu Zhao, Fa Shi, shining everywhere, universal radiance, Dharma Master, he used what are called the Wu Jiao. There's the Wu Jiao and the Shi Zong, Shi Yi. There's also the Shi Xuanman. This is all part of what's called the Worthy Leader School, the Shenshou School. Now, what's this about? Here's the idea, is that the Buddha spent 49 years explaining sutras 2,500 years ago. What he said, we remember. So we have the text directly from our founder of Buddhism, and the Dharma came to China, and so 500, if you say it was 500 BCE was when the Buddha lived. So let's get to the time of Christ, according to our calendar, that's 500 years. Then you move, that's when Buddhism first came to China, was around the Han Dynasty, the first century before and the century after the year zero, right? Our first, how we clock time. Now, the Tang Dynasty, when the Avatamsaka Sutra was translated into Chinese, was another 500-600 years. So we're 1,100 years away from the Buddha's lifetime. During that period, Buddhism changed. Instead of looking back to India and saying, well, the Indians had it right, we Chinese are just kind of a pale facsimile of Indian Buddhism, at this point, there was a Chinese Buddhism that stood up on its own. One of the prime individuals responsible for that transition was a monk called Zhi Dashi, the great master, the wise one. He formulated what are called the Tiantai, the heavenly platform, the vista of heaven. The Tiantai teachings focused largely on the Lotus Sutra. There was another line of great monks who did the very same thing with the Avatamsaka Sutra. They created what was called the Shenshou school. And there were 5 in particular during the Tang Dynasty, and then there was 2 more at the beginning of the Song. We're now into 1100. So Buddhism went through a couple purges. There were some emperors who were deeply opposed to Buddhism, and they tried hard to wipe it out of China. And that was pretty much the end of the Shenshou school. The libraries were burned, and this is the Jiaozong, the teaching school, and the principles of the teaching school are kept in books, obviously. So when those books are burned, the school has to rebuild itself. Well, the Shenshou school didn't rebuild itself after the first decade of the Song Dynasty, which is 1100. That's when some people call him the 7th teacher, the 7th generational patriarch of the Shenshou school. His name was Jingyuan Sanzang. He lived in Hangzhou, and he had one monastery there that taught the Avatamsaka school. After him, no more. The Avatamsaka school went to Korea, interestingly. So that's the whole story of the Shensho school. But patriarch or teacher, ancestor number 4 of the Shensho school, is the monk called Changguan, National Master Clear and Cool, Qingliang Guoshi, and we pay a lot of attention to him because he wrote a long commentary to the Avatamsaka. So this is the Shensho school. Do we carry on the teachings of the Shensho school now? Not so much. Point to it, respect it, hope that somebody at some point will put the effort to translate its teachings. The problem is it tends to be very philosophical. And this is not, we're not going into the Avatamsaka through that door. We are going through a different door, which I'll explain in just a moment. Here's the verse. Ready? 春而不挡上九花，翠峰茅棚共次化。从此振兴贤守教，华严大法遍河沙。A group of casual friends hiked up Nine Flower Mountain. Together, they planned to renovate the huts on Jade Summit. They made the Shensho teaching flourish once again. The Avatamsaka Dharma pervades worlds in number like Ganges sands. Okay, there we are. Now, I think what I'll do, this is an important point to make because people, we too, Master Hua's, I guess you call it the Fa Jie Zong, the Dharma Realm school of Avatamsaka, are also propagating the Avatamsaka school and hoping it will, spread like grains of sand in the Ganges River. But the issue is the Avatamsaka school in the Shensho version there's a reason why it didn't flourish.
Hang on, let me listen.
Thank you. There's a reason why it didn't flourish any further, and the way, for example, the Chan school did or the Tiantai did. The Tiantai school has a lot to do with Chan and bowing repentance, because that was what Master Zhizhe really, he himself cultivated a success, was bowing and Chan. There's a lot of activity. The Shensho, the Worthy Leaders School of the Avatamsaka, talked about the principle of the interpenetration of noumena and phenomena without obstruction. And to describe that, to get it to make sense to people, it requires a certain philosophical point of mind. Because of that, the reputation of the Avatamsaka Sutra in general is don't explain it, it's Buddhist philosophy. Master Hua told us about it, showed us where to find it, and encouraged us to investigate it on our own. Meanwhile, what Master Hua emphasized was the compassion of the Bodhisattva and his practices. So what we are propagating with the Avatamsaka is called a practice-centered approach. 以修行为宗，以修道菩萨六入万行为主. Right? We are very interested in how Sudana took the 84,000 Dharma methods and went from being a young man to being a Buddha in a single lifetime. So when I pick up the Avatamsaka Sutra and I hear Sudana say to his teacher, I've been walking for months now, trying to learn everything that my last teacher taught me, And, I really don't get it yet. Tell me how to bring the Buddha Dharma into my heart, into my body, into my nature, or from my nature, how to bring it alive. And the teacher goes, have you made the Bodhi resolve? And so, yes, I have. He says, good. All right, let me tell you about it. Wow, it was just incredible. This lotus came out of the ocean, and the Buddha was sitting on it, and then he rubbed the crown of my head, and he taught me how to be mindful of, and you go, right. Where's the philosophy? You can extract philosophical elements from the Avatamsaka Sutra, and that's what the Shensho school does. It finds the deepest threads of noumena and phenomena threading through the sutra, but that's not the beating heart of it. It appeals to the left brain, but the right brain, the thing that comes to life in color, in living color, is the heart of compassion of the Bodhisattva, who says, these living beings are totally upside down. If I don't save them, who will? Right? So I'm going to get to work and follow Sudana, follow Samantabhadra Bodhisattva, follow Maitreya Bodhisattva, follow Guanyin Bodhisattva, follow Manjushri Bodhisattva, and cultivate the way. That's what gets me out of bed in the morning. That's the Shensho school from Master Hua's teaching of it. It's called a practice-centered approach. So the word in academia is hermeneutic. What approach? What lens do you look through? 看哪个镜头而观这个风景? Which lens are we going to look through to see the heart of the Bodhisattva? That's how we're bringing the Avatamsaka. And it's a funny, I have to say it this way, because we don't want to be disloyal to the school of our own sutra, the Shensho school. On the other hand, there's a reason why the Shensho school no longer existed past the Song dynasty. It was a little abstract, and we need to pin it down to actual behavior and to people's hearts. Then it will live again. All right. Now, I keep teasing everybody and saying, next week we get the empty cloud falls in the river. Well, next week he falls in the river. So here it is. You can see it's 98. Don't be late. Don't miss it. Otherwise, you're going to miss the drama. There he is. Oh, doesn't look good. But it's not only does he fall in the river, it's what he does after he falls in the river. For him, no big deal, right? But you got to be here. What do they say? You won't be late, but you will have to hurry. Don't miss it if you can. All right, Shagali Baila. Okay, let's dedicate merit. We have a world that seems to be moving towards explosion. People's tempers are leading to disasters left and right. So dedicating merit to cool things off, like Master Clear and Cool. Please make your wish, however you'd like to dedicate merit. May every living being our minds as one and radiant with light, share the fruits of peace with hearts of goodness, luminous and bright. If people hear and see, our hands and hearts can find in giving unity. May our minds away to great compassion, wisdom, and to joy. Gotta move the song forward. May kindness find reward. May all who sorrow leave their grief and pain. May this boundless light dispel the darkness of our endless night. hearts are one. This world of pain turns into paradise. May all become compassionate and wise. May all become compassionate and wise. May all become compassionate and wise. And then, before we leave, we can bow to our teacher and to the Buddhas. Here we go. Okay, 3 bows. Bow in respect to the Venerable Master. It's going to do it for us for today. See you all next week. Amitofo. Happy New Year, everybody.